What if I told you that every economic boom, every crash, every recovery you've lived through wasn't random? That behind the charts, headlines, and political promises, there's a quiet war being fought. A war not between nations or armies, but between real wealth, the things you can touch, build, and own, and the paper promises printed by central banks. Because when money can be created infinitely, wealth itself becomes an illusion. This is the silent war between central banks and real wealth, a story that spans centuries, yet remains largely hidden in plain sight. To understand this war, we have to go back long before digital currencies and inflation reports. For most of human history, money was something real. Gold, silver, salt, commodities that required labor and scarcity. Then came the early bankers of Renaissance Italy, families like the Medici, who discovered a powerful idea. You could lend more money than you actually had as long as not everyone asked for it back at once. Fractional reserve banking was born, and with it, a subtle shift in power. For the first time, money and wealth were no longer the same thing. As empires expanded and wars demanded funding, kings and governments realized they could borrow endlessly from bankers if they were willing to pay the price. Interest. That was the first front in the silent war. By the early 20th century, national banking systems had matured. But the global economy was volatile, and financial elites saw an opportunity. In 1913, the United States created the Federal Reserve, a private central bank with public branding. It wasn't the first, nor the last, but it marked a turning point. The Fed had one mission: control money supply and stabilize the economy. To do that, it needed the power to create money out of nothing. And once that power existed, it spread like wildfire. The Bank of England, the European Central Bank, the Bank of Japan, all gained similar abilities. Governments no longer needed gold, they needed debt. Because every dollar, every euro, every yen in circulation was now born from borrowing. The war escalated quietly. Real wealth, land, resources, human labor became collateral in a system designed to expand credit. The silent war turned official on August 15, 1971. President Richard Nixon announced that the U.S. would no longer redeem dollars for gold, ending the Bretton Woods system that had tied global currencies to something tangible. From that moment, money became purely conceptual. It was no longer backed by gold, it was backed by trust. Trust in governments, trust in banks, trust in the system itself. But trust is fragile. In the decades that followed, the money supply exploded. The cost of living soared while wages stagnated. Debt, public, private, corporate, became the lifeblood of the new economy. The rich didn't just own assets anymore. They owned the credit system. Every dollar you borrow is someone else's asset, and every interest payment is a quiet transfer of your labor into their portfolio. Real wealth, your savings, your home, your time, began to erode under the slow, invisible tax of inflation. By the 2000s, the war had evolved into something even more sophisticated. Debt wasn't just a side effect. It was the main product of the global financial machine. Central banks slashed interest rates to near zero, making borrowing irresistible. Governments borrowed to fund programs, corporations borrowed to buy back stocks, and consumers borrowed to maintain lifestyles that real wages could no longer support. And every cycle of borrowing made the system appear healthy. GDP rose, stock markets boomed, but it was all built on credit, not creation. Meanwhile, real wealth, things that hold intrinsic value, lagged behind. In the 1970s, 1 year of median income could buy a home. Today, in many countries, it takes 10. In 1980, $1,000 in savings could comfortably grow through interest. Today, it loses value sitting in the bank. The silent war wasn't fought with weapons. It was fought with interest rates, bailouts, and inflation targets. When crises hit 2008, 2020, and beyond, the solution was always the same: print more, quantitative easing, stimulus, rescue packages. Each new fix injected trillions into the system, money that didn't come from productivity, but from keystrokes. At first, it seemed to work. Markets recovered, politicians declared victory, and the machine kept running. But the cost? Every new dollar diluted the value of the ones before it. In 2023, global debt surpassed $300 trillion, more than 3 times the world's GDP. And yet, economists still call this normal. The silent war isn't just between the banks and savers anymore. It's between the illusion of wealth and the reality of scarcity, because you can't print energy, food, or human skill. And when money loses meaning, those who hold real assets, land, commodities, productive labor, hold the true power. Today, the war has moved to a new front, the digital battlefield. Central banks are racing to create digital currencies, programmable money that could track every transaction, set expiration dates, or even restrict where you spend it. To many, it's sold as convenience. To others, it's the ultimate control mechanism. Meanwhile, decentralized systems, cryptocurrencies, gold-backed tokens, peer-to-peer finance are rising as modern acts of rebellion. But even here, the old forces adapt. It's regulations, bans, safety measures, all aimed at keeping the system centralized. Because control over money means control over time, behavior, and freedom itself. And as this war enters the digital age, the gap between real and artificial wealth widens every year. Every empire follows the same financial arc. Real wealth gives credit expansion, gives paper money, gives inflation, gives collapse, gives reset. Rome debased its silver denarius until it was worthless. France's paper assignats ended in ruin during the Revolution, and now, global fiat currencies are walking the same path, only this time, it's synchronized worldwide. The patterns are clear. Each generation thinks this time is different. Each one believes the system can be managed forever. But debt always outgrows the real economy until it can't. And when that moment comes, wealth doesn't vanish. It transfers from those holding paper promises to those holding real assets. So what can we learn from this silent war? Takeaway #1. Real wealth isn't what your bank statement shows. It's what holds value when the system resets. Land, resources, skills, and networks are harder to inflate than numbers on a screen. Takeaway #2. Every financial system built on credit eventually consumes itself. Understanding history isn't cynicism, it's protection. Takeaway #3. Transparency is the enemy of manipulation. The more people understand how money is created, the less power central authorities have to weaponize it. Narrator's somber tone. The silent war continues, not in headlines, but in balance sheets, interest rates, and policy rooms you'll never see. And the question is no longer if the next reset will happen, but who will be ready when it does. Visual, fade to black, quiet hum of a printing press echoing. Narrator final line. If you found this story eye-opening, share it because awareness is the first defense in a system built on illusion.
Ace.
And remember, in the end, real wealth never needs permission to exist.